parents moved from Columbia, Missouri to St. Louis, Missouri, and I was switching high schools. And those of you who switched high schools midstream kind of know kind of how difficult that can be, definitely socially, just the awkwardness of trying to fit into a new group that already has their friendships set. And what was particularly difficult for me, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is I just felt this enormous pressure to fit in. And so I would do things to fit in that I wouldn't normally do. Like, for example, this one group of friends that I wanted to connect with, they would always dip, right? If you don't know dipping tobacco, like Skoal. And so I was like, well, I want to do that. So I got my little can of Skoal, learned how to, do that and stick it in and so I dipped with these guys, when we go to at lunch and things like that. Dipping, and then one day I accidentally swallowed it, and I got instantaneously, violently ill. It was brutal, and so I wasn't so crazy about dipping anymore, but I still did it. I still did it because I wanted to fit into this group. And 20 years later, after high school's over, I've come to realize that actually this desire to fit in, this desire to please others doesn't actually go away. It's not just a high school thing. It's something that we all wrestle with, and I'm sure you have your stories as well. And if you are a person, though, that wants freedom, like I think we're a culture, hey, we want to be free, we want to be free people, this is a prison cell that you have to get out of. This is a bondage that you need to get rid of. And the good news of the gospel, the good news of what Jesus says to us is that he wants to give us freedom. He wants to give us freedom from all things. The Apostle Paul writes to the church in Galatia, in Galatians 5:1, he says that for freedom, brothers, Christ has set you free, that we've been called to freedom, that we have this, God calls us into this life of being free from everything. And this is something, if you want to be a free person, you have to break free from. But I've come to find out, though, if you struggle with people pleasing, it's every time it comes calling your name, it's one of these things that you just kind of get sucked back into. It reminds me of what it says in Proverbs, like a dog who returns to his vomit, so is a person who returns to his folly. It's just these things, these bondages, these things that we know that we shouldn't be engaged in, but we just go back to over and over again. And so I want to talk about people pleasing today. And let me give you a definition. I think you're going to be impressed with this. I worked all night on it, and it's going to blow your mind. Let me show it to you. We got it? People pleasing is living so that people will be pleased with you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I know. It's living to be popular. It's living for praise. It's whenever somebody says something to you positively, it's like makes your day. Or if something says somebody negative to you, it like ruins your day. It's a serious addiction for a lot of people, and for me included. I mean, after all, as a human being, you want to be liked, right? You want to please people. My wife, she asked me what I'm talking on today. I said, I'm talking about not living to please people. She's like, well, maybe Brian, you could do a message about how you could learn to please people, but that's a whole other topic. But anyway, there's nothing wrong actually though with trying to make someone happy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to please others, but it's when you make decisions based upon solely how someone will respond. So whether that's a friend or a pastor, a mother-in-law, your kids, your parents, your boss, your spouse, someone in your pastor, someone in your president. It's when you live for this, when you live based upon the approval of other people, it can be absolutely destructive. It will control you. It will imprison you. Proverbs 29:25, you might want to write this one down. It says, the fear of man brings a snare. The fear of man brings a snare. It's a trap. It promises something, but it actually just enslaves you. Let me give you 5 reasons why people-pleasing is destructive. 5 reasons why people-pleasing is destructive. Number 1, people all want different things. Now, it'd be one thing if everybody wanted the same thing. But, my spouse wants me to be something, my boss wants me to be something, my kids want me to be something, my friends over here want me to be something else. And so it'd be one thing if everybody wanted the same thing, but everybody wants different things. And then, you're just spinning the plates, and then you kind of relax once and the plate falls, and guess who takes the heat for that? Yeah, that's you. people pleasing is destructive because people want all different things. Second reason is people want wrong things. People want different things. People want wrong things. If you make people pleasing goal, there are people in your life who will want wrong things. I'm reminded of Aaron in the Exodus 32. Aaron was kind of Moses' right-hand man. Moses was the leader of the people of God, the Israelites, and did amazing things, led them out of bondage and slavery to the Egyptians. And Aaron was a guy who fell into people-pleasing. And in Exodus 32:1, you can read about this story, but basically Moses goes up into the mountain and to get the whole Ten Commandments thing. And he comes down and he finds that Aaron had made this golden calf, that the people said to Aaron, hey, we want you to make this golden calf. So he makes this golden calf, which, long story short, wasn't the right thing to do. It was very destructive for these people. And then Moses comes to him and said, hey, why did you do this for? And Aaron says, let not the anger of the Lord burn hot. You know the people, they are set on evil. So here's Aaron. He knew that this was wrong. He knew that the people were set on evil, but he was just like, I just fell into this. It's just, and it was a very destructive thing. I don't know how many times I've counseled people, and not just teenagers. I mean, tax-paying adults would say, why did you do it? Well, because this so-and-so wanted me to do it. They just felt this pressure. Think about how this whole sin thing entered the human equation. Eve fell into pride. Adam fell into people-pleasing. Adam, why did you do this? Well, the woman, she did it. She wanted me to do it. It's people want wrong things. Number 3, people-pleasing is impossible. People want different things, they want wrong things, and it is impossible. People who base relationship on performance are never satisfied. And when I mean never, I mean underline never. They're never, ever satisfied. Because how this relationship works is you do what I want you to do, and when you do what I want you to do, this relationship's good. But when you don't do what I want to do, that's our thing, is you do what I want you to do. It's an absolutely destructive relationship. It's when figuratively, someone takes a match, someone takes gasoline, and they look at you and they say, you know what these things are? You know what happens when I light this next to this? There's an explosion. So if you don't do what I want you to do, there's going to be an explosion. I'm either going to yell at you, I'm going to hang up on you, I'm going to shun you, I'm going to say mean things about you. People-pleasing is impossible. You just got to come to the conclusion that people who base relationship off performance are never, ever, ever satisfied. 4, this should be obvious, I think, based upon the first 3, is that it's hurts people. Ultimately, you end up hurting the people that you're trying to please. Adam in the garden ultimately hurt his family, hurt his wife. Trying to please his wife ultimately hurt his wife, and not to mention billions and billions of other people. And the example I gave you about Aaron and Moses, if you read about it, 3,000 people died that day because of what Aaron had did. It hurts people. When you fall into people-pleasing, here's what you got to know. Number 1, people are going to want different things, wrong things. It's impossible, and you'll hurt yourself, but you'll actually hurt the person you're trying to please ultimately. Number 5, if you're not a believer, this may not matter to you. But number 5, people-pleasing disqualifies you as a servant of Christ. Paul writes this to the Galatians. He says, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. People-pleasing is destructive. The good news, though, is that Jesus has come to give us freedom. All in favor of freedom? All right, let's talk about that. So we're going to look at 1 Corinthians 4, where Paul addresses people-pleasing. Some people say, does the Bible actually talk about people-pleasing? It actually does. It really does talk about that. And the situation here with Paul in 1 Corinthians 4, or just really in this whole letter to the Corinthians is that Paul's trying to minister to these people, and they weren't getting it. He had planted the church, and they were kind of getting tired of Paul. And then you can read about this guy, Apollos, that you read about in Acts 18, that Paul also mentions in 1 Corinthians 3. And Apollos apparently is very articulate. He's tall, dark, and handsome. And people are like, hey, we don't like Paul so much anymore. We want Apollos. We want him. And all of a sudden, Paul felt this pressure. He felt like, he was in a popularity contest that he didn't enter into. And now he feels this pressure to conform to what these people wanted from them. And so he begins to write to them based upon this pressure that he felt to please these people. And that's what we're going to talk about. So he says, look, I'm not going to fall into people pleasing. So what does he do? So I hope you have your Bibles open still, by the way, in 1 Corinthians 4, because I'm going to walk through some principles, but based upon what we're talking about here. Number one, so how do you break free? If you are in this trap of people pleasing, how does Paul break free? How does Paul help us to break free? Number one, you have to minimize your focus on what others think of you. Minimize my focus on what others think of me. Just don't give too much weight to what others say. How am I dressed? And do they like how I'm dressed? Do they like the meal that I gave them? Why aren't they talking to me? Did I offend them? Did I do something wrong? Did I just conversation over and over in your head? You're just like thinking about, did I do the right thing? Did I do, just don't pay much weight to what others think of you. That's what Paul does here in verse 3. He says, it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you. It's a very small thing. That word judge means verdict. This verdict, this opinion that you have over my life is a small thing. He's minimizing his focus on what others think of him because people want different things. Hey, some say, I want Paul, I want Apollos, I want Peter. People want different things. Some of them were wanting wrong things. That's why he had to write these letters in the first place. But ultimately, it's like, it's impossible. So Paul says, I'm not going to fall into this. So I love how Paul positioned himself related to other people's opinion. He says, it's a small thing. He says, your opinion of me is a small thing. Now, it's important to note that he didn't say it means nothing, right? He wasn't saying, I don't take input from anyone. I don't care what anyone thinks. I just ignore it all. He didn't say, no, he said, I'm minimizing the influence that you have in your opinion. Not you as a person, but your opinion that you have. That's important to know. It wasn't that Paul didn't take advice, but he minimized his opinion. It wasn't nothing, it was a small thing. It wasn't a primary factor in how he lived. It wasn't a primary factor in how he made decisions. It was a small thing to him. Actually, and I love this, it says it was a very small thing. And just a small thing. Your opinion of me is a very small thing. It didn't sway him, which, by the way, I'm not suggesting you tell this to other people, by the way. Right? So Monday, your boss comes up to you and says, hey, what'd you do? Well, I went to church. Well, what was that like? Well, my pastor said basically that your opinion of me is a very small thing. I'm suggesting you think that. I'm not suggesting you say that. So number one, Paul says to kill people-pleasing is he made the decision to make people's opinion of him a very small thing. He says, I'm not going to be judged by you or any human court. He wasn't talking about a government, but he's just saying, there's this collection of people who've decided that they're going to input on my life. They're going to, the self-appointed critics who are going to kind of just, they just kind of call me up, send me emails, and it's like, did I hire you? And just going to tell you what they think of you. He says, I'm not going to be swayed by that. He says, your opinion of me is a very small thing. You're not making the person a small thing. This isn't about despising other people. This is about not being preoccupied what other people think of you. It's minimizing that importance. It's minimizing your focus on what other people think. So let's practice here. So you're driving home and you're from work and your boss calls you and he's all upset and he's flying off the handle and he's throwing a fit and he's making a big deal about nothing and because he made a mistake and now he's blaming you and so he kind of lets you have it, and as you hang up the phone and as you're processing everything he said to you, you're going to make the decision that what his opinion is of you is what? A small thing. Okay, we got to practice that again. I just want to give you the answer before I tell you. When I say fill in the blank, it's a very small thing. That's your answer. Okay. Okay, let me give you a different one. You're talking to your mom, and your mom is, from out of town, and she's talking to you, and she's talking to you about how she doesn't feel like you love her because, you never call and you never visit, and you're going through, she's kind of giving you the third degree, and she's making you feel very, very guilty, and then she drops the bomb on you and says, you know what, I just don't feel like you love me, and so you hang up the phone, and as you're thinking about whether or not you want to scream or yell, throw the phone across the room, you're going to make the decision that what my mother thinks of me is a very small thing. Okay, now I think you got it. Okay, so number one, that's what he does. Paul, how did you keep the Corinthians? They're always hammering on you. How did you handle that situation? Well, I just made the decision that what other people think of me is a very small thing. But that's not all he did. It's not only them. But number two, he says, I'm going to minimize my focus on what I think of me. So I'm going to minimize my focus on what you think of me, but I'm also going to minimize my focus on what I think of me. It says it's a very small thing that I should be judged by you or any human court. And then he adds, in fact, I don't even judge myself. He says, I don't care what you think of me, and frankly, I don't really care what I think of me. I have a very low opinion of your opinion of me, and you know what? I have a very low opinion of my opinion of me. I've minimized my focus of what you think of me, and I'm minimizing my focus of what I think of me. Paul's saying it's a trap just to live by your own standards. It's a trap to say, I'm tired of what everybody else's opinion of me. I'm just going to live for myself. I'm just going to do what makes me happy. Paul says, don't do that. It's a trap. Here's what happens. You grow tired. You grow very tired of living up to your parents' expectations. You grow very tired of living up to society's expectations. You grow very tired of living up to your church's expectations, and it makes you feel terrible. So you know what? I'm just not going to live by anybody's standards. I'm going to live by my own standards. But living to please yourself is the worst kind of people-pleasing there is. Both having a low self-esteem and a high self-esteem is a trap. The key to living in freedom isn't thinking more of yourself or isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's not focusing, it's minimizing your focus on what your other people's opinion. It's actually minimizing your focus on your own opinion. If you want to break free from this, just don't crowd other people's opinion out and then elevate your own opinion, because you're still people-pleasing. Paul says, I don't even judge myself. I don't go around living for the approval of others, but I don't go around living for the approval of myself. I won't allow what other people think of me to define my identity, and I won't allow my own opinion of me to define my identity. So I don't care what you think, and I don't care what I think either. I'm not swayed by your opinion, and I'm not swayed by my own opinion. Madonna had this to say in Vogue magazine, a magazine I like to peruse, and I know it's there's no way to explain that. It's like, how did you know that? Well, let me just tell you, when you can Google anything, and so you just, a lot of illustrations, like you just say, like celebrity struggles with identity, boom, and then you find something. So I don't read Vogue. But anyway, she says this. She goes, my life, a while back ago, 2005, my drive in life comes from a fear of being mediocre. This is always pushing me. I push past one spell of it and discover I'm a special human being, but then I feel I'm still mediocre and uninteresting unless I do something else. Because even though I have become somebody, I still have to prove that I am somebody. My struggle has never ended, and I guess it never will. It's just constant trying to please. She says it's a trap. I've tried to live for myself my whole life, and it just feels like I can never please myself. I find that I can never please my mom, I can never please my boss, I can never please my friends, but you know what? I've found that I can't actually please myself either. It's just this constant bondage that I am living for myself. So Paul says, I don't even judge myself, but then he adds, I'm not aware of anything against myself, but I'm not thereby acquitted. He's saying, look, my conscience is clear. Look, I don't know of anything that's wrong in my life, but it doesn't mean that I'm innocent. People say, follow your heart. Let your conscience be your guide. What if your conscience is wrong? You can have a clear conscience and go off go the wrong way. I'm sure maybe Hitler had a clear conscience. Bin Laden maybe had a clear conscience. You could have a clear conscience and still be wrong. Just because you don't find fault in your life doesn't mean you're guilty. And just because you feel terrible about yourself doesn't mean you're guilty. What he's saying is that my assessment of myself isn't the most important thing. At the end of the day, I could be happy with myself and still be doing poorly. And at the end of the day, I could be unhappy with myself and doing wonderfully. The point here is that the standard isn't what other people think, and the standard isn't what I think. There's a different standard. Proverbs 3:7 says this. Good one to write down. Be not wise in your own eyes. Just don't be wise in your own eyes. Don't think that you have the answer. Don't think that you are the one who judges rightly. It's a trap. Madonna figured it out. Hopefully you don't have to go through the same thing. Be not wise in your own eyes. So to get out of this prison cell called people-pleasing, number one, minimize your focus on what other people think of you. Number two, minimize your focus on what you think of you. But thirdly, there's a third thing that's really important, because the first two aren't enough. The third thing is to maximize my focus on what God thinks of me. Maximize my focus on what God thinks of me. Because Paul says, ultimately, in verse 4, he says, it is the Lord who judges me. It's the Lord who judges me. You don't judge me, and I don't judge me, but ultimately it's God who judged me. How do you because it's like, how do I practically make other people's opinion of me a very small thing? How do I make my opinion of me a very small thing? Paul says, well, ultimately what I do is I don't focus on, okay, don't listen to them, don't listen to men, don't listen to them, Ultimately, I'm preoccupied, okay, what does God think of me? He wrote to the Ephesian believers in chapter 5, verse 10, he says, find out what pleases the Lord. I've made my preoccupation not what I think of me and not what others think of me, but every moment, every day, I'm thinking, what does God think of me? What does God think of this situation? Every night before I go to bed, I'm getting out a piece of paper, Paul said. I'm asking God, is there anything in my life that you're not pleased with? Is there anything in my life that you want me to move in a different direction? Because ultimately, God, you're the judge. You're the judge. I don't know how this intersects your life, this issue of people-pleasing. I can tell you how it intersects mine. Every day, or every week, I should say, I get up here and speak. It doesn't matter how good or effective last week was. I have to come up here and do it again. And at every moment of the entire message, I'm getting constant feedback. I'm getting constant feedback by your body language. I'm getting constant feedback by your eyes. I'm getting constant feedback by your laughter or lack of laughter, or your, just like, are you tracking? Are you not tracking? Is it making sense or not? I'm getting constant feedback. And then after this, if you don't know that, we do 2 services here, 9/11. Between this, we'll go into another room, and the elders will kind of nitpick and do different things. And what about this and what about that? I'm getting more feedback about my message. I look on Twitter, I see what people say or don't say. Is there anything I said that's actually worth repeating? So there's feedback there. I look in the communications card. There's feedback there. Mostly it's just doodling, but there is some feedback there. And so I'm getting constant feedback. And if that's what I'm paying attention to, whether it's good feedback or bad feedback, I'm ruined as a leader. If I'm trying to deliver a message for this person or that person so they'll be happy or they won't not be angry. Why? Because people want different things. Some people like this kind of preaching. Some people like these topics, don't like this topic, like this style, not that style. Be funny, not as funny, whatever it is. People want different things. Some people want wrong things. People want wrong things. This is actually talked about in the Bible. In 2 Timothy 4:3, Timothy, those 2 letters were written to, this is Paul in his old age. He's writing to a young pastor, and he's giving them advice. And he says, hey, let me tell you what's going to happen. He says this in 2 Timothy 4:3. He says, there's a time coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but will have itchy ears, and they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. But people want wrong things. People, Christians, Bible-believing Christians, can be some of the most demanding people on the face of the earth. And what happens is if their favorite part isn't, what they do, they take the Bible, they take one little section of the Bible, and if their favorite part isn't your favorite part, they'll hammer other people. That's why people outside the church think people inside the church are Bible what? Thumpers. Yeah, because they thump people with the Bible. Some people want different things, some people want wrong things. But at the end of the day, I just have to find that people pleasing is impossible. So what I've decided to do is that your opinion of what I say, take a deep breath, is a very small thing. And what my opinion of what I do is a very small thing. Because ultimately, it's God who judges. Ultimately, he's the one that I need to be looking at. And that's something that we all need to do. Doesn't mean that we don't take advice. Doesn't mean we don't take input. Doesn't mean that we don't because I think a lot of the way God speaks to us is through other people. So if you're crowding out, by the way, if you're crowding out people in your life, I mean, that's a trap to fall in as well. That's not what Paul's saying at all. He's not saying get rid of other voices in your life. But he's saying don't be preoccupied. Don't give your first attention to what other people think of you. Because if you do that, you're not going to be able to hear what I think of you. You're not going to be able to hear what I want to talk to you about. And this is the key. The key is to know that God is judge. At the end of time, you will not stand before your boss. You will not stand before your mother. You will not stand before me, your community group leader, your kids, your neighbor. However, you will stand before God. 500 years from now, what's going to matter? What your sister thinks? Not. It is the Lord who judges. And this text tells us why. Because only God judges at the right time. This verse says, do not pronounce judgment before it's time. People always are judging at the wrong time. You notice that? They don't have all the information. I don't know if you've read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's an okay book. But there's a story in this. I think it's a great illustration of what we're talking about here. He says there's this guy on this train. It was in Chicago. This guy on this train going from one destination to another. Businessman reading the newspaper. This father and 2 kids come on, and these kids are just kind of going crazy. I mean, they're like jumping over things, knocking over people's coffee, hitting his paper. He's starting to get a little annoyed. He doesn't really want to say anything yet because it's kind of a big deal to kind of say something right away. So it goes on and on and on, and he sees these kids going crazy, and he sees this dad just kind of like not even tracking, not even paying attention. And so he puts down his paper, says, hello, you want to do something about this? And then the father kind of comes, he goes, oh, I'm sorry. He says, we just, came back from the hospital and their mother passed away. I'm sorry. And then, of course, the guy's like, oh, excuse me, I shouldn't have said anything. And he tries anything I can do to help. He didn't have all the information. People are always pronouncing judgment at the wrong time. Don't ever say, I know why they did that. You don't know. You think you know, but you don't know. Don't ever say, I know why that person did that. I know why she did this. I know why this is this way. You don't know. Only God is the one who judges. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment for the time before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things that are hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. When the Bible says do not judge, it's not saying that we don't judge ever. It's saying, because we judge actions. And the Bible says, if you catch someone in a sin, if you notice someone moving off a few degrees, you should talk to them. We judge acts. So when the Bible says don't judge, it's not saying don't judge anything. Because we judge actions. What we don't judge is the part we can't see. We don't judge the motivation of the heart. We don't judge because only God can see that. Only God could see the motive. Only God can see the heart. So when the Bible says don't judge, it's not saying don't judge actions. It's saying don't judge motive. I know why they did this, but we don't know. So because we don't have all the information, because people don't have all the information, because they don't understand my motives, I'm not going to live for the judgments of others. And because what? I'm not going to live for my own judgment, because the reality is I don't even know my own self. I don't even know my own motives. I don't even know my own heart in this. But there is one who does. God knows my motives. He knows my heart. He sees everything. He sees every action. He sees every motivation of the heart. He sees every thought. Even the things that we may not even pay attention to, he notices and he judges. And his judgment will be so fair. His judgment of you will be so fair. Everything you've done, everything you've thought, everything you've hoped for, every positive thought, every evil thought, he will judge you so fairly. Are you ready for that? No way are you ready for that. He will judge you based upon everything you've done, but if you are in Christ, he will judge you for everything that Jesus has done. See, here's the thing. We're all living for this approval from other people, or for ourselves, or for whatever. And we have to work and work and work and work. We have to perform and perform and perform to please my mom, to please my boss, to please my sister, to please my friends. We have to perform in order to get a positive verdict. And for ourselves, we have to perform until we can finally achieve what we feel like we should achieve. And then we can give ourselves the verdict. But that's elusive. It's only in a relationship with Christ that he gives you the verdict before you do anything. He's the one who says over you, you are my son, you are my daughter with whom I'm well pleased. The moment you become a Christian, the moment you trust in Jesus, he gives you the performance. He gives you the verdict before any performance. And when you get a hold of that, to the degree that you get a hold of that I am accepted and loved by him, will be the degree that you'll want to find out more about this God. You'll want to find out, as Paul says, what pleases him. You won't be preoccupied of what your sister thinks or what you think, but every night you'll get down and say, God, what do you think? You're the one. You're a God full of grace, full of mercy. God, is there anything in my life that you're not pleased with? Get a pen and paper, he'll tell you, right? Some people say, God doesn't ever speak to me. Ask him that question. He'll tell you. He'll speak to you. And be loving. He's not the judgmental God you think he is. He's not like people in our life, some people in our life. He's not even like ourselves. See, we're very judgmental of ourselves, truth be told. God is so gracious that he does not treat us as our sins deserve. But he calls us to find out what honors him. You see, the bigger picture in all this is that Paul's saying love must conquer in your life. How do you conquer people-pleasing? Is that you look to a greater love. You look to a greater source. You look to a greater opinion. And it is important how we live. I'm not trying to minimize that. In fact, this whole section in chapter 3 and chapter 4, it's all about, like, Paul says things like, Apollos waters and, I do this, but at the end of the day, it's God who causes things to grow. And we're just servants. He's the owner. He's the master. We're just servants. How should you regard us? Paul says, am I Apostle Paul? No, I'm Servant Paul. So we don't call each other Pastor so-and-so here, because the reality is, if we want a biblical title, it'd be Servant Brian and Servant Kurt and Servant Rick and Servant whoever. So we don't call each other these esteemed titles. We're servants. He's the master. He owns it all. And what's a servant supposed to do? Well, he's supposed to be found faithful. So at the end of the day, what really matters is are you being faithful to what God's called you to do? We're doing this thing called Surge here in a few weeks. We'll look at all the great things, and God's doing amazing things in this church. Let me tell you something. It's not, when you stand before God and God says, hey, what did you do? Well, I was a part of a great church. That's not being faithful. Being a part of a great church is a good start. But are you being faithful? Are you personally being faithful to the things that God's called you to do? The things that we talk about all the time over here. Are you being faithful to that? Are you finding out what pleases him? Is he your judge, or these other voices? You see these comedies, these kind of B-rated comedies where the president of the United States is tired of being the president, so he finds a twin brother or someone, and they switch roles or something like that. And so everyone around what they think is the president is really just some knucklehead. But so everyone's trying to please this president who's not really the president. They're doing all these things. They're treating him, but he's not really the president. And at the end of the movie, everyone looks foolish. Let me tell you something. You are living that movie. If you take other people's opinion or your own opinion of you as this is the one I have to please, because at the end of the day, you're going to be like, well, I thought he looked like it, but it's just an imposter. It's the Lord who judges. It's the Lord who judges. Why don't you get out your communication card?